under the same eternal stars that had inspired the first systematic observations of celestial phenomena, the great innovations of mathematics and astronomy had emerged from patient scholarly work in ancient temples. But beyond the palace chambers, where kings made decisions that shaped empires, beyond the temple complexes where priests communed with divine powers, the true heart of Mesopotamian civilization beat in the daily rhythms of ordinary people, whose lives gave meaning to the grand achievements we remember today. The day began before dawn in the residential quarter of Uruk, 4,000 years before Christ. Namu, a potter's wife, stirred the embers in her hearth as the first light touched the mud-brick walls of her modest home. The soft glow of oil lamps flickered through narrow windows as families throughout the neighborhood began their morning routines that had remained essentially unchanged for generations, grinding grain for bread, spinning wool into thread, preparing for another day of work that sustained the urban life that made civilization possible. A home, like thousands of others in the ancient city, was a testament to ingenious adaptation to the materials and conditions of Mesopotamian life. Built of sun-dried bricks made from river mud and straw, the walls were thick enough to keep the interior cool during scorching summer days and warm during the brief but sharp winter cold. The flat roof, accessible by an external stairway, served as additional living space, where the family slept during hot nights and where wool was spread to dry after washing. The morning ritual of bread-making connected Namu to her ancestors and to women throughout the city who performed identical tasks at the same hour. Grain stored in large ceramic jars was poured onto a stone quern, where patient grinding with a smaller stone produced the flour that would become the day's sustenance. The rhythmic sound of grinding stones echoed from dozens of households, creating a percussion that announced the city's awakening. Water for the day's cooking and cleaning was drawn from the neighborhood well, a community gathering place where women exchanged news and children played while their mothers filled ceramic jars that would be carried home balanced on heads or hips. These wells, fed by channels that connected to the great irrigation system, brought the life-giving waters of the Euphrates to every corner of the urban landscape. As the sun climbed higher, Namu's husband, Enlil-bani, left for his workshop near the temple complex, where he created the pottery that served both practical and ceremonial functions throughout the city. His workday would be spent shaping clay on a potter's wheel, another Mesopotamian innovation that had revolutionized ceramic production, creating vessels that range from simple storage jars to elaborate ritual containers decorated with religious symbols and mythological scenes. The potter's workshop was one of dozens of specialized craft centers that gave Mesopotamian cities their distinctive character. Metalworkers hammered bronze into tools and weapons in workshops that glowed with furnace heat even in early morning. Textile workers operated looms that produced everything from coarse work clothing to fine garments suitable for temple ceremonies. Jewelers crafted ornaments from gold, silver, and precious stones that demonstrated the prosperity and artistic sophistication of urban civilization. Most precious of all were the workshops where craftsmen worked lapis lazuli, that brilliant blue stone carried across 1,000 miles from Afghan mountains to reach Mesopotamian artisans. These pieces, beads, amulets, and ceremonial objects that caught light like captured sky, represented the vast trade networks that connected individual cities to a larger world of commerce and cultural exchange. Children in these craft quarters learnt their trades through apprenticeships that began almost as soon as they could hold tools safely. Young boys worked alongside their fathers, gradually mastering techniques that had been refined over generations. The pottery workshop where Enlil-bani worked included several apprentices who would spend years learning not just the mechanical skills of shaping clay, but the artistic traditions that distinguished fine pottery from mere utilitarian vessels. Education for most children was practical rather than formal, focused on the skills they would need as adults rather than abstract learning. Girls learned from their mothers the complex arts of household management, not just cooking and cleaning, but the sophisticated techniques of food preservation, textile production, and herbal medicine that sustained family life in urban environments. Only a small percentage of children, primarily boys from wealthy families, attended the scribal schools that taught reading and writing. These schools, usually attached to temple complexes, provided the literacy that was essential for commerce, administration, and legal transactions. Students learned cuneiform writing by copying literary texts, mathematical problems, and legal documents that familiarized them with the cultural and practical knowledge they would need as professional scribes. The market squares that served as economic and social centers of Mesopotamian cities came alive each morning as merchants arrived with goods from throughout the region and beyond. Local farmers brought vegetables, fruits, and dairy products from the irrigated fields that surrounded each city. Herders from the surrounding steppes offered wool, leather, and meat. Craftsmen displayed pottery, textiles, metalwork, and jewelry that demonstrated the artistic achievements of urban workshops. But the most exciting arrivals were the long-distance traders, whose caravans brought exotic goods from distant lands. Spices from India, incense from Arabia, cedar wood from Lebanon, and precious metals from Anatolia transformed local markets into international bazaars, where different cultures met and mingled through commercial exchange. The bargaining that accompanied these transactions was as much social ritual as economic necessity. Buyers and sellers engaged in complex negotiations that established not just prices, but relationships that might endure for years. Successful merchants were those who understood not just the value of goods, but the cultural expectations and social dynamics that govern commercial relationships across ethnic and linguistic boundaries. Payment for goods involved various media of exchange that reflected the sophistication of Mesopotamian commercial practices. While barter remained common for local transactions, standardized weights of silver served as currency for larger purchases. For the most valuable transactions, written contracts specified terms that protected both parties, while creating legal obligations that could be enforced through the courts that administered Hammurabi's code and its successors. Family life in Mesopotamian cities was governed by customs that balanced individual desires with community expectations in ways that maintained social stability while allowing for personal happiness. Marriages were typically arranged by families who sought partners that would enhance their economic position and social standing. But romantic love was not unknown and was celebrated in literature and religious festivals. The Epic of Gilgamesh, recited by storytellers in evening gatherings throughout Mesopotamian cities, included passages about love and friendship that spoke to universal human experiences. The goddess Inanna, patroness of love as well as war, was honored in festivals that celebrated romantic attachment alongside fertility and agricultural abundance. Households typically included extended family members, grandparents, unmarried siblings, and sometimes servants or slaves, who shared living spaces and economic responsibilities. The privacy that modern families expect was rare in ancient cities, where multiple generations lived together in close quarters that required cooperation and mutual respect for family harmony. Evening brought the most cherished hours of daily life, when work ended and families gathered for meals that combined nourishment with social interaction. The main meal of the day featured bread, vegetables, and occasionally meat or fish, accompanied by beer that was safer to drink than water and provided both nutrition and mild intoxication that eased the day's tensions. After eating, families often gathered in courtyards or on rooftops where oil lamps provided light for conversation, storytelling, and music that connected contemporary experience to ancestral traditions. Elderly family members recounted tales of gods and heroes, while younger relatives learned the cultural values and practical wisdom that would guide their own adult lives. Music was an integral part of these evening gatherings, with instruments that included harps, flutes, and drums creating melodies that told stories without words. Professional musicians performed at religious festivals and royal ceremonies, but ordinary families also maintained musical traditions that enriched daily life, with beauty that transcended mere survival. The religious observances that punctuated daily life provided rhythm and meaning that connected individual existence to cosmic purposes larger than personal concerns. Daily prayers and offerings acknowledged the divine forces that governed human affairs, while monthly festivals created communal celebrations that reinforced social bonds and cultural identity. The great seasonal festivals that honored patron deities were the high points of urban life, occasions when entire cities became stages for religious dramas that reenacted mythological events and renewed the cosmic relationships that sustained civilized existence. These festivals included processions, sacrifices, theatrical performances, and communal feasts that created shared experiences uniting all social classes in common celebration. As night settled over the ancient cities, as oil lamps were extinguished one by one in households throughout the residential quarters, the people of Mesopotamia rested peacefully in communities that had created new forms of human society while preserving the essential relationships that gave meaning to existence in any age. In mud brick homes, where families gathered around dying embers, where children fell asleep listening to stories that connected them to the great sweep of human experience, where parents planned tomorrow's work while reflecting on the day's achievements and disappointments, the true miracle of urban civilization revealed itself, not in the grand monuments that impressed visitors, but in the daily rhythms of ordinary life that proved human beings could live together in large numbers while maintaining the personal relationships and cultural traditions that made life worth living. Under the eternal stars that had guided humanity since the beginning of time, Mesopotamian families slept peacefully in their ancient cities, confident that dawn would bring another day of meaningful work, social interaction, and spiritual connection that made urban existence not just tolerable, but deeply fulfilling. Life moved with the grace of the rivers themselves, steady and patient, nourishing the human communities that had learned to flourish between the waters that connected all existence to the eternal sources of life. Our journey through the corridors of time continues as we explore the literary and philosophical achievements that emerged from these daily rhythms of urban life. Discover how ordinary human experiences were transformed into eternal stories that continue to speak to the deepest questions of existence. The immortal tales of Mesopotamia await.